Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Steve. It's Tuesday. It's the beginning of my new Ableton production techniques series. So the situation is during track feedback, we come up with lots of tips on how to make people's tracks sound better. Other people write tips in the chat. I speak and say tips, and I know they fly by quickly. So if you understand everything already as an audio engineer and you know how to do it, there's my monitor screen. You know, if you already know how to do this stuff, it makes sense when we might say like, oh, I'm taking the low shelf up plus 4 dB at 60 hertz or whatever. That might make perfect sense to you as a producer. But if you're not familiar with those techniques and you're kind of doing it for the first time, it might be like, oh, you know, I mean, I told you what to do, but not exactly how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, why to do it, what problem it's going to solve, and how to know if that's the right solution for you in the future. So what I want to do with this series is take some time to actually teach the stuff we talk about in track feedback to give you a clear view of how to EQ your tracks, how to use compression and sidechaining and multibanding, or all kinds of synth stuff about Ableton devices. You know, we talk about synths and waveforms and LFOs and modulators and routing matrices and ADSR envelopes, and sound design is so much fun. So I'm looking forward to teaching some of that. So the basic plan here is I'm gonna go live Tuesdays and Thursdays and show you sessions from my own tracks where I use production techniques, and I'll just demonstrate what I did and tell you why, and do like a before and after so you can hear it. And I'll also go into some of the audio engineering theory where necessary to actually talk about the structure of the tools in case you haven't been introduced to the types of EQs and filters. What are they called? What do they look like in the Ableton devices? So from this, I hope you're gonna get a good, solid understanding of what the tools are, how to use them in your own tracks to make everything sound better. And to be fully complete, I have some online courses that back this stuff up, where if you really wanna learn this with downloads, videos, project packs, Ableton session lessons where you learn by doing it with my revolutionary projects, and some PDF guides and stuff, there's an online course that I'll show you later where you can actually sign up and get support for your music and learn it in depth. So that's the plan right here, and this is experimental, but I love teaching live on video. When you get here in the chat, say hi. And let's get going with some EQing. So here's the track, and it's all laid out in the timeline, and it's ready for a mix. So let's take a loop right here, and I'm just gonna jump into some of the sounds and start EQing a bit. And this is all kind of done, right? Here's a kick drum sound. Oh, you know what I want to show you? Okay, one more thing. This is a little bit of a workflow tip. So here's a pro tip right away for the session workflow. I use Spectrum Analyzer all the time, and to be able to really see what I'm doing with the sounds, and we'll talk about this with Spectrum, I put a Spectrum on the master channel and I map a key, that little symbol, whatever that thing is, section symbol, so that wherever I am in the section in the song, if I want to solo an element and get a look at what it's doing in the spectrum, I just hit that key, I see the Spectrum Analyzer on the master channel, and I can easily get a visual picture of what that sound is doing. Okay. And here we are with the kick drum soloed. Now I've got an effects rack with some sounds on there, and right away I hear one problem. There's a click at the end of that kick. Do-good, 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 do-good. That doesn't need to be 6 voices either. So I can see that when I first produced this track, I think it was maybe done in a little bit of a hurry. So first thing is, let's get rid of that little tail sound. That's kind of a sound design issue. Yeah. And a little tiny fade on the tail. Future Sound Beat, hey, how you doing? Thanks for coming in. And anybody want to type in a question, go ahead and let me know what's on your mind. So here's my EQ curve. Now basically, let's go without any of the effects at all, right? All right, so let's bypass the EQ scale, and I'm going to show you on this EQ so I can make some changes. We can do a before-after comparison. This kick drum is basically working pretty well already, and one of the first things you want to do when you're even beginning to work with the track is pick a sample that works, and I'm checking here to see if the filter section is active. And if you're in Simpler and you can use your filter section to make the change in the sound that you want to do, you can do it that way. Now for the kick drum, obviously we want to have a heavy bottom that comes clear through the mix and not a lot of other garbage. Let me show you what I mean by garbage. So we are in... Okay, so I can sweep through these bands. You might notice the bands are preset. You can save your EQs as templates by right-clicking on it and doing Save as Default Preset. Check out the frequency bands I have picked out. 30 Hertz, 75, 275, 600, 900, 2.2, 3.5, and 22 kilohertz. That takes you almost through the whole entire range of human hearing. Let's go through these one by one and see how they affect our kick drum. So that low one is sort of like the ringing sound you can use to pick the note or the pitch of the kick, or add some bump on the bottom. The very lowest one might be something where you want to remove some lows. So let's park that up around 30 hertz. And there's always some debate about which type of high-pass filter sounds the best or is the cleanest. I'm not going to get into that debate right now. I want to talk more about what I'm doing with this technique. CD, thanks for doing this, Steve. You're welcome. Not sure who that is, but happy you're here. What I'm doing right now is called the frequency sweep technique. So this is pro tip number 2. Pro tip number 1 is put a spectrum analyzer on a key command where you can pull it up and easily see the sound in the spectrum. Number 2, the main thing of EQing is find the right place to cut sounds when they don't sound right. So what I'm doing is called the frequency sweep, where I boost something up, sweep around to find a really ugly, nasty part of the sound, and then cut that out. What you don't want to do EQing, you don't want to start by boosting stuff and finding out like, oh, what's the biggest bass I can boost? How big can I boost the bass? That might be what you do in your car stereo, but for EQing, the golden rule is cut before you boost. I need a t-shirt that says like cut before you boost. So the frequency sweep technique is something that's not only for Ableton, it's for any EQ in the world, on an analog mixing board, inside a synthesizer, anywhere you can have control of the frequency, the gain, and the Q, or even just frequency and gain. So here's the technique again. Set it to like a medium resonance, not the tightest, like medium, you know, Q, what is that Q, like 5, whatever. I boost up some frequency, like a lot, and I'm going to sweep around to hear where it gets really nasty. Okay, 214. And I like to do this in a kind of realistic way, so I use a bit of a wide Q and not the ultimate boost, because it kind of rings. If you go really narrow, almost everything is going to sound kind of bad. So I make a pretty wide boost, add about maybe 9 dB. Do you hear that around 150? Cool. So I'm just going to cut that out and go to the next band and sweep around, look for a place that sounds kind of boxy, nasty, piercing, sharp. Right around 850. And mostly what I'm doing is showing you the frequency sweep technique right here. I'm not going to do every single sound for 5 minutes. You can do that in your own sessions. That's not what I'm here for. Now I'm up to one more band, and let's see if we can pull up the click on the kick drum to get the okay. Somewhere around 2.5 kilohertz, you'll hear a little bit of a click kind of a sound. And then finally, I like to do this on kick drums a lot, is pull down the top end and ask the question, do I hear the kick coming back when I open up that low pass? now I'm going to A-B a little bit. And then I'm reversing the scale. Ask yourself like this. If you reverse the changes, boost the stuff you cut and cut the stuff you boosted, do you want all that goo, goo, goo? Do you want that in your mix? No, you do not. And 200% is too much. So back to around 100%. And that might sound subtle to you. I'm not sure if you're listening on headphones or laptop speakers or in monitors or whatever, but we basically did a couple of changes to remove some of the cardboard kind of sounding like coo, 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 nasty parts of the kick and pull up the parts that we do want. And that is the frequency sweep technique, which is pretty much something you can do all the time in any sound. So if you have a question about a specific sound you want me to work on, let me know. I'm going to go to the bass channel and undo some of the effects we have on so far. We'll go backwards. There's my teaching EQ. Here you have an auto filter with a high pass shape. Okay, that was a big difference. And I'm hearing some reverb. Oh, that's in the sound, okay. So let's take off the reverb. First thing I did was I added inside the sound this auto filter, which makes kind of a performance technique, which is going to be part of my sound design for doing creative effects to make buildups and stuff. So I'm not going to consider that really part of the EQing of the sound, because that's like a performance tool. What I really want to do is make this sound good with the kick, right? So let's see, what did I do in this EQ? And how would you describe that sound? Before the EQ, it's brighter. It has like a twang. And after the EQ, it's kind of deeper. So let me bypass this and do some frequency sweep and pretend I didn't know what the other one was going to be. All right, so let's turn on EQ over here. Get to that EQ on the push. And there I am with my controls. Notice that EQ loads up with those presets already ready to go. This time I'm going to start in the mid-range and look for some kind of boxy stuff that doesn't really sit. And here's a little trick. If you're not really sure about frequencies and you're kind of new to it, make a high-pass filter shape, go all the way up to the top and remove everything, and then slowly roll it back down and listen for when the body of the most important part comes through, okay? So if there's nothing below 2K, then okay. Up above 300 is where it's kind of plucky and stuff. Above 150 is some overtones. Down at 135, I'm starting to feel like it's a bass line. So I know that basically above 200, I don't really need a lot of that sound at all. Let's go the other way. Now I've got a super low pass filter. My question is, which part of the sound do I need to use? Which frequency range is the most important from this sound? And how do I get there, right, to use it? Now I'm coming up from the bottom. 65 hertz, I can hear some sub. Up to 120, that's a sub bass, right? Okay, up until 200 hertz, it just feels like a big womb, oh, woo, woo, like a sub womb thing. And from 200 up to about 1,000 feels like that twangy stuff. So let me show you this. This might be kind of fun. I'm going to put band 1 back to high pass filter. Band 8 is going to be a super low pass filter. Now, if I cross those, we get nothing. So what I want to do right now is use these two filters, a high pass and a low pass, to define the mid-range sound of the bass, to really get a clean idea of what is the cool, plucky pitch that pulls out the notes we're playing. And then after that, we'll go into the lower part and boost up the bass to make sure it's feeling like subs. Question, I've been trying to figure out EQing reverb sends, also EQing subs with kick, if you feel like addressing that. Dude, I'm EQing a sub and a kick right now. So this channel 2 is the sub bass line, and I'm just kind of playing around to figure out where is going to be the mid-range and how do I identify that? Because I know the sub range was almost all the way up to 200 hertz. It felt like a sub. So we could set this low pass filter at like 1.5K and not be losing anything important. This high pass filter, around 200, it changes from sub up to like that plucky thing. So I'm going to say from 150 up to like 2000 is the mid-range body of the bass. So this whole part of the EQing is just telling you how to figure out where to EQ your track. Now let's pick this mid EQ and see if I can just take out some of the parts that don't sound so good in this middle band. I'm only EQing the mid-range because the bass sub is going to be easy. Up there it's kind of clicky. Around 400 it's kind of mucky. Cool, cool, cool. And that's kind of ringing a bit, which I don't want so much of that ringing. And that middle has a little bit of like kind of that's kind of clunky. I'm doing pretty extreme resonance here. And then I do want to pull up one part of that kind of click texture. Wait. Did I just do that one? Yeah. EQ7. It's easy to get mixed up with which band you're editing. Now, all around here feels like kind of a click. So I'm going to actually boost that. Now let's go back to band 1. And notice I left band 2 unused, so I can play with that if I want to. And let's check out what this looks like on our master spectrum. The question I'm asking right now, and this is related directly to kick drum and sub bass, I'm asking the question, what's the lowest note the sub is playing? There. Looks like a note C, and the frequency is at 65. How do I know? Because I put the mouse on the line in spectrum, and I'm looking in this little box that tells you hertz and MIDI notes. That note shows you, or that bump on the spectrum shows you the lowest sub-bass note. The mouse is showing me around the note 64. So basically means I can put a high-pass filter all the way up to like 60 hertz on this sub-bass and not lose any of the power of the sub, because the lowest note it's playing is functionally 60 hertz. High pass filter at 60, sounds good. High pass filter at 90, all of a sudden the sub's gone because those notes are getting cut off. So when you're EQing sub, bass, and kick, the main question you want to ask is what bass notes are playing, and then how do you put the kick drum somewhere else? So if this is the range of bass notes from like 64 up to 100, I know that my kick drum should be below 60s, maybe a big 50 hertz, boom, boom. And then above 100, I could have a little bump at like 120 for the top end of the kick, and that whole thing from like 60 to 100 is getting scooped out. Let me know if that makes sense on this question, because I'm going to go back to the kick and check my 50 hertz range and ask the question, is my kick drum big at 50, or is there something here I can boost around 50 and then maybe scoop out from 65 to 100? Now, you wouldn't do this just purely for the sound of the kick drum, right? But when we see that the sub bass is occupying that huge range from 65 to 100 with those exact notes, let's plug in some sounds or some bands and take those down. So here I am, band 6, and I'm gonna go to about 100. Let's try this with a notch, actually. That might be kind of fun. For first thing I want to do is put in a notch at like 65, right where that low sub bass is. Not too tight. And then band 2 was doing something at 75 hertz to kind of boost up the low end. So, and this is important, instead of trying to boost the low end inside the kick drum channel, what I'm going to do is put the kick and the sub together in one group, EQ the group, and then I can boost the lows to get the thump of the kick and the sub together, which is super fun. 12:20. I'm keeping an eye on time. I want to make these episodes a little bit short enough so they're usable without going 3 hours. I mean, I would love to sit down in the studio with people and just do a session, like a 4-hour EQing marathon. But that's more fun when you can be in the room, you're holding the EQs, you're tweaking it, and you're feeling it and hearing it. When you're watching me, we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter. So I just put in a notch EQ on band 6 at like 67 hertz. Now I'm on band 2. I wanted to undo this little boost and let's go to like 100 hertz. And pull some of this down. So we have something like a nice dead thump. Watch what happens when I play the kick and the sub together. That sounds really bad, boosting that place in the kick drum. And I think I'm hearing that metallic kind of a boost in the kick, I mean in the sub bass was getting to be a little too much. So that's band 7. That clanky thing. So you know what we're gonna do for fun? Let's put these together again. And that's a kick drum and a sub bass playing nice together. And you can see on the master channel, there's the kick, making that line. You can see the sub bass notes popping up right above it, and they're all in their own space. We just EQ'd a little bit down on the kick drum, identified that part of the sub being the place to kind of boost. And now we're gonna slowly open up some of the sub bass body. Even though that sub sounded good by itself, all those metallic plucky sounds in the bass line, when you combine them, you got to watch out that it might not sound as good as you think. So another solution you might want to try is you can leave those notches in place, put in a shelf EQ like this. So wherever you park it, it's going to be the same amount of boost and cut at all frequencies. Just take down some of the high frequencies on the sub. Now let me show you my mono low bus over here, because I was talking about EQing them together. Aha, you can hear we had a bunch of EQ in place already. That explains that. So this EQ, so what I did was I created a bus group with just the kick and the sub alone, because they're both mono, they're both low end. I want to have that nice low thud, be able to EQ and compress that sound together. So I took these two tracks, routed them to the mono low bus on this channel, the bus. It's just an audio track. I set it to no input, monitor in, and solo. And that is what we sounded like, kind of raw. Let's undo all this. That's where we started from. I didn't play the whole high frequency part. There's our sub. And kick, and we got the click on there. And now for a bit of shaping. Bigger. And now that I have a whole other set of frequency bands, I can go in and boost the low end together. That's you hear my noise gate on my mic. That's not noise in the track, because I got some background fans going. So let's take this down a little bit, because that's kind of ringing. And let's go. What if, just for fun, we wanted to boost a bit of a low shelf? I'm gonna do this carefully. Even 3 dB is a lot. Up to like 120. And there you got that heavy, deep bottom with the mid kind of stuff taken out, and the kick and the sub are working together. Let me know if that answered your question. The core of what I was doing was first identifying what sound is popping up really big in the sub bass line. Or not what sound, but what notes, like what actual frequencies, using the spectrum analyzer. Translate those frequencies into MIDI notes or notes in the musical scale by using this little box in the spectrum analyzer. And I'm seeing the note C at the frequency 64, and that gives you the exact thing to plug into your high-pass filter settings on that channel, so you can cut out the stuff below that frequency. And I'm not going to put exact 64 because I want the note, but right below it. So I'm going to set it to like 60 hertz. And of course, you want to listen and ask the question, like, where do I hear the part I want? And where do I not hear it? Because all this stuff below 60 on there is just extra, like, woof, 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 that's not going to really make your mix. It doesn't give the subwoofers anything to push that you want to hear in the mix. So there we have EQ'd sub and kick. Let's go back to the mix. And maybe I'll review what's on these other buses while we're here. Bit of a high pass filter to get rid of the extra lows. EQ with some mids to get rid of the real shrieky stuff. And you were asking about EQing reverbs, right? Figure out EQing reverb sends. Okay, I got a drum reverb right here. And really the key for this is going to be knowing what sounds are coming into it and how you had to cut or boost with them. All right, so let me get an EQ on here. My push is locking up. That's special. Hope my feed isn't locking up. I got the spinny ball. All right, so before we get into EQing the drum send and the drum return, let's identify what's coming into this drum reverb, right? Drum reverb is on A, so anything that's turned up on send A is gonna be coming in there. And it looks like my vocal group going to master. So what I'm doing is asking the question, in the drum mix, first I want to know what sounds are in the drum mix and how do I EQ that whole mix, because anything that comes into the reverb is going to have that same effect, right? And then we're going to look at what we can do maybe in the EQ itself. And let's kind of bypass the EQ as much as we can inside the reverb. So first we're here in the drum bus. Notice I put an auto filter on here to get rid of any extra lows, because if there happens to be like 100 hertz or something in this drum group, I don't want the top loops playing that. I only want the kick drum playing that. And that's pretty well cleaned up so far. So I'll minimize that. Now this EQ, let's look at what I was cutting in here and figure out why we don't want those in the track, right? So band 3. Let me know if you hear what I'm doing right here at 1.24. When I cut it out, the drums are like cleaner, like clacky. And when it's in, it's like a scraping kind of a tone. So I want to take that down. I'm thinking stuff like, I'm always thinking, what is this sound going to sound like on a big sound system really loud? This is the shrill. That resonant peak, anywhere around above 2.5K up to 6K can be too much. So I'm taking a dip down there on the drum mix, and another one, most especially 3.5 kilohertz. You can almost always go to like, if you ever hear a sound that's like a riser, a snare drum, a clap, a lead, a synth that's in a high melody, and your ears are getting that feeling like, oh my God, my ears are distorting, go straight to 3.5 kilohertz and put in a notch EQ, because that is the place our ears are really sensitive. Like, do you want that? You don't. So I'm scooping those down for basic listener comfort. Let's look at one more place that's a common culprit of weirdness, and that's around 600. Let me know if you hear that at 638. It's kind of like, so let's take that down a little bit. And I don't want to go EQing minus 15. I mean, really, these are pretty extreme EQ cuts. And let's remember, we're listening in solo, not listening in the whole mix. So I'm just going to back off those gains a bit. It's good to like listen in solo and EQ to find out where you want to cut, but then drop the sound back in the mix to make sure that your EQ business is not actually destroying your music. You can exaggerate it here with the EQ scale, and we can go to the minus EQ scale to hear if that is pulling it up worse. Imagine if your drum mix sounded like this. Like, that would not be good. So right there, I just did a bit of A/B EQ on what's in the drums. Now, here's the deal with reverbs. Reverb, you don't want to put a lot of low end in there because it makes a lot of buildup of like the muddy, flubby bass frequencies. Woof, woof, woof. So the main rule of thumb for reverb is don't put low sounds into the reverb unless maybe it's a bass line and it's the only sound going in and you're very careful with the blend and you're doing it on purpose. But if you're not, don't put your whole drum mix, including the kick drum, into a reverb to try and get a drum room because it's not going to sound good. So when you're looking at a reverb, try and basically mimic your sounds. So if I'm EQing down at like 593, 3.5, 2.4 kilohertz, maybe check out some of those frequencies and see if your reverb would actually sound better cutting some of those out. Again, we can totally high-pass filter the reverb and just figure out what frequencies are we hearing at all. And listen to how this reverb comes back down. If you can see this frequency band or frequency number in the reverb module, ask yourself, what frequency do you first hear the reverb? Like 7K? Now, if that sounds good to you, you might want to only have like a real bright, sizzling kind of high reverb for your drums. Now I'm getting the clap, the body. Down to 300, I'm hearing some stuff that I might not need. Ooh, and down at 117, I started to hear the heaviness of the clap. Can I even EQ? Aha, band 1 and 4. 2 and 3. And again, in the reverb, like around 500, 600, it sounds kind of crappy. Let me know if you hear that in the reverb at 529. It's like kook, 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 kook. So let's take some of that down. And can I get another band? I don't want the reverb too dark, so I'm going to take off that one. And now let's look for some of that mid-range piercing kind of a shrill sound, right? Up around 3.5, I'm going to gain minus now, or A and B the gain. Let's just listen to this cymbal. Here's a cymbal with a 3.5 kilohertz boost in the reverb. It has like a screechy kind of a like, and let me know if you can identify what I'm pulling up with that 3K boost in the reverb. If you could give me a yes at 3K, it really makes a difference to identify these kind of things and pull them down all throughout the mix. So if you go to your cymbal individual channel, your snare drum and your clap, and put in a notch EQ at 3000, a little bit, not a lot, but enough to notice. And you go through to your stereo drum mix and you put in a little bit of an EQ dip around 3000 and your reverb again. All those places where you take down like minus 2 dB at that really sensitive, prickly part of like 3000, 4000 or something, a combined series of small edits or small EQ cuts ends up with a really smooth sound overall that sounds like very natural and good. That's a lot easier than making a whole bunch of raw channels, slapping them into one stereo mix, and putting a massive notch EQ cut at 3.5K, where you lose some of the texture of the sound that you want to keep in the high frequency for detail and like the character of the instruments. So when you're EQing, what I've been trying to kind of show you is like, it's easy to do too much when you EQ a channel in solo. So do solo the channel, listen to what's in there, do the frequency sweep technique, make some frequency cuts, and then drop it back into the mix to make sure that what you're doing is actually making it sound better and it's noticeable. Because you don't want to spend 20 years cutting notches in a sound and drop it back in the mix and be like, oh, that's fucked up. Like I did with the sub bass channel, right? I EQ'd the sub bass first, it sounded good by itself, combined it with the kick drum, and suddenly there was way too much metallic mid-range that sounded like low-mid distortion. So EQing is a compromise of what part of the frequency range of the whole track is going to be occupied by each sound. And if you get it working, it should feel like a very natural, smooth thing that you don't even hear the EQ being there. It's just an absence of problems. Kind of like if you put like a cucumber in the salad, you know, you peel the cucumber, people in the salad, when they're eating it, they're just eating cucumbers. They're not thinking about like, oh, I got a piece of peel, or I got a piece of dirt, or I got some roots. They just want the part they want and not the other part. Let me know if that makes sense. I'm not quite sure who's watching. Nick is here. What's up, dude? I just saw your comment. And to finish up for today, I think I'll round it out. It's about 12:40. There's our drum reverb. Before and after. Listen how nice that reverb sounds. And let's do that again. I can actually hear that. Do you hear the difference of the AV when I turn the EQ on and off in the reverb? I can actually pick up on that. That's kind of cool. And let's bring back in any other sounds that may have gotten muted. Oh, here's another pro tip. On my reverb returns, I put the letter Z for my computer keyboard. I don't want to have it on the push because I don't need to do that as a performance tool, but as a mix tool, I like to be able to cut all the effects sometimes and just hear the mix. And just for a little preview of what else we could talk about with EQ, this vocal was crazy messy. It was recorded from a phone, a person walking around outside at night.
I'm walking barefoot on the grass, grounding myself.
The main part of the voice is happening right up in that section of frequencies that our ears are very sensitive to, like 3000-ish. Listen to what happens when I play the raw sound without any of this crazy EQing, right?
I'm walking barefoot.
That's the dry sound.
Grass.
And after.
Grounding myself to this paradise. It's unbelievable.
Those insects have like this high frequency thing.
I just saw a shooting star. Oh, fuck. It was incredible.
So a lot of times with EQing, you're removing problems, taking out parts that distract you from the music, and identifying the main core of that sound to bring it forward in the mix without the garbage around it. If you can think about it like that, you'll be in good shape for EQing. So let me review what I talked about today for the first session of EQing and how to filter and EQ your tracks. Number one, set up a master spectrum analyzer on your master channel and map it to a key where you can tap one key, pull it up, and look at it. While we're here, copy these settings to get fast response. Block 16, whatever. Channels right and left, refresh rate 4, average 1. Keep the graph on bins, keep the maximum line. So you can press stop and identify with your mouse exactly where you are hearing a sound by seeing it on the spectrum line. And then probably the most important is the range. Don't let it go to auto with a weird range, because once it starts jumping up and down, like, that's not that useful, right? I set it to a fixed range from 0 all the way down to minus 180. That way the horizontal line stays in place, the scale isn't jumping all over the place, and it's a pretty accurate, fast feedback. Like those melodies, look, you can beep, beep, beep. I see them popping up right there. If those melodies are feeling too loud, I can easily go, I'm looking in the little box right here. I can go to that channel, find that synth, put in a notch EQ at 1.19 kilohertz, another notch at 1.06, and another notch at 8088, and just get those ridges down so the sound feels more comfortable. You know what I mean? Michael, helpful stream. Thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, thanks for the comment. That really helps me so much to see comments. I love teaching online and hanging out with people and like showing how to do stuff. And what helps me a lot is when people ask a question or let me know, like, hey, slow down, talk about the reverb or talk about something else. So if you have a particular question you want me to talk about on Thursday, let me know. I'll be happy to do that. And reviewing. Okay, pro tips. Master channel spectrum. Sorry, got to turn you off. Master channel spectrum with a key command on it. Pro tip number 2, when I was working on the kick drum channel, I talked about the frequency sweep technique, where you pick a frequency or you pick a band of your EQ, boost, and look for a place that feels like it's kind of nasty. You know what I should have done is taken off this effects first. Frequency sweep technique. Pull out the garbage. Boost, sweep, listen. And it's a kick drum, so we're looking for a nice dead sound. Do I want that in my kick drum? I don't think so. I could totally hear that. Clashing with the bass line. So we actually talked about a lot of good stuff. We got the master channel spectrum with a key to look at finding the exact frequency you're hearing and finding what note it's on so you can get it on your EQs. For something like the sub bass, once you see the sound, you can ask the question, where is the lowest note, what frequency is it, and go to that channel and EQ at that frequency to pull out the best of the sound that you want to keep and not cut off the part that's important. And then we were looking at EQing at the group level, which we did with a bit of drum, sub bass, mono low stuff, and a bit of drum bus, cutting out some stuff that we needed to, using some performance filters like what happened right there with the low pass filter in this build-up. And then we looked at EQing a reverb, where I basically copied some of the same EQ frequencies that we cut from the drum bus, also cut them out of the reverb, because if it sounds bad in the dry signal, it's going to sound bad in the wet signal. That's not parallel EQing, but it's like mirror EQing, where we're EQing the return the same way as the dry signal. So I think that's enough for today. Now what's going to be happening? Let me get over to courses.mixatexture.com. If you're interested in learning how to EQ your tracks at a deeper level with some background audio engineering to really explain what is the range of human hearing, what are the different EQ and filter types, how does pitch in a melodic scale connect to frequencies in your EQ in numbers, that's really handy. There is a course I built called How to EQ Your Tracks. That's here on the Mixatexture member site, courses.mixatexture.com. And this is a really cool course that has university level knowledge. Actually, some of the documents I wrote for this course, a friend of mine was using them to teach in Pittsburgh at a university with audio engineering courses. And what you get in here is a bunch of presets to drop on your tracks that will get you started EQing, just like this one right here. But even more importantly than that, this EQ reference library has a bunch of documents that talk about all the stuff I'm saying, the audio engineering theory, what are you hearing, what are the words that describe the frequency range, like if I say muddy or shrill or boxy or wooden, like those are sounds that might not be so good. So you learn in this course how to connect these numbers on EQ8 in Ableton to the certain sounds that we hear and that we feel, so that when people listen to your music, it's going to feel good. Your tracks are going to seem like crisp and bright on top and heavy and deep on the bottom. And the whole thing is going to come across as a professional mix without those distracting moments of like, oh my God, that crash was way too loud, I'm dying. Because the worst thing of all is when you have a great track that's totally playable until one sound comes in and ruins the whole thing. And we do not want that to happen. So you want to be consistent with EQing stuff to make it sound comfortable. And if you're interested, what you can do, real audio engineering lessons, is come to courses.mixatexture.com. Here's a list of the documents: Essentials of EQ and Filter, Intro to EQ series on video that explains some of the stuff like I did today, EQ and filter types, frequency landscape, secrets of spectrum like I was explaining today with the spectrum analyzer, equalization spreadsheet. That gives you an idea of which frequencies sound good and which ones sound crappy for each instrument, like bass lines, snare drums, hi-hats, drum loops, vocals, keyboards, lead melody synths, bass lines, sub bass. That's really handy. And then filter pairs and frequency and pitch chart you will learn when you get in there. A couple comments from people, system requirements and stuff. And there's the button to buy now. So that's what it's all about. And what is coming up next is on Thursday, I'm going to go into this course, review some of the lessons online, or review some of the online lessons in a live stream, and continue EQing my tracks to show you what I'm doing, A/B the difference, to hear before and after, and answer your questions. And remember, we have a Mixatexture Discord server. So if you buy this course, you can get into this special Discord channel for the EQ course and actually post your tracks where you're just doing before and after EQing to get some feedback on it. So that's what it's all about. Welcome to the first Tuesday of the Ableton Production Techniques series. I'm looking forward to doing these every week for months. I love teaching this stuff. There's a lot to get into with EQing, compression, reverb, MIDI, melody, bass lines, harmony, music theory, sound design, song structure, mixing, even a bit of mastering. All these production topics that we reference when we're in track feedback. I'm doing this series so I have time to teach them in detail, in person, answer your questions, hang out. And if I work on my own tracks during the live stream, hey, it's good for me too. So if you have any questions, you can always find me, steve@mixatexture.com. And tomorrow is going to be Wednesday. We have track feedback at noon as usual. I will see you there. Thanks for watching, everybody. And leave me a comment if you have a question. All right, see ya.